Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Dynasty Underdog. I'm your host, Ryan Dawkins. With me tonight, Bailey Beeman, Jake Kornblum. I am back. How are you guys doing?
Welcome back, bro. Welcome back. My voice is back too, and the Patriots are back.
Ah,
We're heading in the right direction over here in the Beeman household. We're doing okay. Jake, how you doing, man?
Good, dude. All I've been thinking about this week is just trades. It's kind of ridiculous. Like, just trade value. How can I just think about more trades? How can I send more trades? What can I do with trades? I talked about trades yesterday with Tommy Blair on the Superflex Super Show. We did a live stream, which is pretty rare for them. Shout
Oh
out to
yeah.
those guys. It was just Tommy and I, no John Hogue, unfortunately, but still a very exciting conversation. So go check that out. But yeah, man, all I've been thinking about is trades. And I think maybe that's what I'm like all year round. So I don't know why I'm saying this like it's any different than a normal day, but this is all for hopefully not, because I think this entire episode is really just us talking about trades. How are you doing, Ryan?
doing better. Not thinking about trades quite as much as you, but uh, it was like last week or the week before I sent off a couple, and they just terrible experience overall. I'm like, you know what? Fuck this. I haven't looked at my phone in like a week and a half. I don't know.
It's crazy.
Terrible experience overall. I love that. I mean, I think the
Yeah.
difference right now is that nobody else is really thinking about trades, and Jake is. That's kind of the difference, right?
Yeah.
At this time of year, which is unique. It's definitely like it feels slower, maybe just because I haven't been as active the last couple of weeks, but definitely feels a little bit slower than usual.
hmm
People taking a little bit of a break. But honestly, I think it has to do with how challenging of a year it was and all the injuries and everything. Everybody's just like, I need to not make more mistakes before I start rebuilding this team back up or making my move. So but yeah, I'm excited for this. We're going to do a little bit of year-end review with some of the DU trades, which will be really cool. Some stuff that we talked about in the past, but kind of looking, I guess, at the value now and seeing if it kind of still makes sense, and keeping ourselves honest. A little accountability here.
All right, let's just hop right into it. So, said we
Do it.
spoke, but time tells a different story. We're going to break down the listener leagues, trades throughout the year, comes at a price. Things change, but do value outlooks. We got ahead of a market, who slowed down, and who lost too much. So, without further ado, we'll hop into DU1, the OG listener league, still going strong.
Shout out.
Shout
Yeah.
out. I still remember the startup that day was crazy, but
Wait, what happened?
Wait, did,
well, I think we lost a guy in the middle of like the
yeah, I
day
think
of.
you're right. I
Yeah,
think you're
because
right. Jake
Of
wasn't there for that one.
the OG
Yeah.
startup, you guys lost someone?
Or
it
was it a
was
rookie draft? Or was it the rookie
no, it was
draft
this.
that
It
it
was
was
the
the
startup.
startup?
I think it was right before we were going away. It was because it all had to do with possible points being what determined
Oh,
the,
Oh,
the rookie
potential.
draft
Yeah,
order.
you're right. There was a whole fight about it. You're
I
right. There was
was
like
I
a
was
whole.
replacing a oh what's it called, a garbage disposal, and I'm just like, what the fuck? I'm already pissed off. This is our first league. Anyway,
Oh my god, that's hilarious. That
it
there was
wait,
a
was
couple different things
they've
that
all been
happened in that
smooth?
league actually.
Oh, I was gonna say the
Yeah.
rest of the leagues have been pretty smooth sailing, at
yeah.
least. So that's
Yeah,
that's a
no, they have.
positive.
They have. I do remember we lost another member during a rookie draft thereafter, like 2 or 3 years after,
Yeah.
and then of course the whole thing where we had to kick out a member of the league, and that was in that league too, and a couple other ones. But yeah, man, that league has been through the ringer. But guess what? Still survive. Still
Still survive.
survive.
Yep.
So we're good.
All right. Enough of that. Enough of that. So do you want April 11th? We had a trade. Drake May plus Nick Chubb for 20 six or 26 first. I'm new here, and a 27 first, and Rashid Ali.
Okay, yeah. I mean, we didn't cover this one back when it happened, but for whoever was acquiring May, that seems like a pretty decent price. And I think the idea during that trade was the person getting the picks was assuming the person getting May was going to have the 101 in 2026. And then, I'm assuming they're thinking 27 is going to be early as well. But that's not quite what happened here. Obviously, as Uriah mentioned, it's the 106, so finished middle of the pack. And that really, really hurts this deal. I mean, even if you got the 101, you'd feel okay about it, right? Because you have some buying power. You also have a shot at another quarterback there. But man, I don't even know if you would have really been that pleased with it given this class, So I question the thought process even back then. I wish we covered it just to have our thoughts on it back then, but just looking back, I would have questioned it back then too and wanting a little bit more. But May hadn't quite hit his stride yet, right?
Exactly.
Like it's not like he had this whole year. So it is some, hindsight bias there, I guess. Any thoughts on this, Jake?
No, I think you covered it well. The only additional thing that I wanted to add specifically with this trade was the breakdown, and we've talked about this on like a separate segment of this analysis that folks will do, especially with individual managers, other managers who are making decisions about their team with, either limited draft capital or what they perceive is a bad roster. And then that pick won't turn out the way that they want it to.
Mm-hmm.
And in the flip side of that, the reciprocal side, that happened to me in DU5. It was funny. I was listening back to a trade that I did, trading away Trey McBride. Uriah was right on the money. He was like, "You're not getting back enough." I wasn't even there to properly defend myself, but he was like, "You weren't getting back enough for Trey McBride." And I was like, listening back, and I was like, "Holy fuck!" The dude was just so spot on. And the actuality was, my team wasn't as bad as I thought it was. I ended up getting, I think, the 105 because I really wanted my pick back, and I ended up losing a shit ton of value. And I think this reality of playing this game with the assumption or almost this like certainty that these picks are going to turn into a top 3 pick, it usually fucks you. I think is the thing that I've learned the most. And to try and put less weight on that and almost be more conservative and say to yourself, you know what, it could be a top 3 pick, but it more likely will be the 104 to the 106. Am I willing to get into that range of values here? Or if you think it's going to be a middle range pick from like the 105 to 107, say to yourself, it's going to be the 108 to the 110, something along those lines, to give yourself a little bit more buffer to not get screwed in these types of situations. That's all.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great point. No surprise, Uriah was on the right side of a Trey McBride trade. That's his guy. That's his guy. But Jake's spot on in terms of trying to guess who's going to have the 101 or the 102 or whatever. Like, you have to have a very specific roster to be like, that is going to be the 101 or 102. They have to have like very few productive assets, like very few. You know what I mean? And because the simple truth is, injuries, whatever luck, whatever it may be, anybody can finish 4th, 5th. It's not that hard to do. And especially max points for, it can be 10-point difference. It can be a 5-point difference. It can be very little. It's it doesn't take much to make that happen. So I think this is a good lesson of, if you're going to make a trade like that, you got to make it really worth your while, right? Like, you have to make sure you're getting extra on top of that 101 or whatever you think it's going to be, because the odds are there's, a 70% chance that it's not a top 3 pick, right? Like, that's just, that's kind of how it goes. So you got to be really careful with this stuff.
Yeah.
Any extra thoughts there, Uriah?
Yeah, just that trade again happened April 11th. So try to make any type of assumption about where the other team's going to end up. It's risky business.
Yeah, especially that one, because in this one, it's 12 months away, right? Like, you're not like, this is really far. You're making a double bet, 12 months and 24 months. Like, that's crazy business to be like, I know for a fact. Plus, on the flip side, that person, the other manager, is saying to themselves, hey, fuck you. You have my pick. I'm going to try and devalue the shit out of that. And that's most realistically what's going to happen more often than not, instead of them being like, you know what, my roster's so crummy, I'm just going to let that pick go to the B to 101 just for you, bud. Like, that's never going to happen.
Yeah, you have all incentive to actually make your roster better from April to, first of all, the start of the season in, August, September. And then from there on out, you still have more time to make your team better and make that pick worse. Like, I know for a fact one of my teams, DU4, where I kind of realized like I wasn't probably going to make it to the ship, but I didn't have my own pick. And I'm like, oh no, I need to make sure that this team makes it as far as possible. I think I ended up third, or maybe I didn't in DU4, but I ended up in the playoffs in there. And I was like, I really need to push this team to make sure that I don't regret trading away that first, which I think I traded it away with Drake May for like Josh Allen. So it's like not the worst process that I was doing there, but it still didn't quite work out. And I needed to make the most of it to make sure that I didn't regret that trade even more than I potentially do right now, because I am a Patriots fan and don't have Drake May anymore. Sad. We can keep moving.
All right. DU1 again. So this one happened August 16th. We had Derrick Henry, Rashee Rice, and Dallas Goedert for the 109, 26, 109, 26, 209, 26 to 12, 27 mid-second. Apparently I wasn't around to discuss this trade, but at the time, Billy sided with the players and Jake also sided with the players.
Yeah, I think we were right on that. I mean, it didn't work out necessarily for Rice. Goddard was a pretty good piece. Is that Derrick Henry or is that Hunter Henry?
That is Derrick Henry, yes.
Yeah.
That's Derrick Henry. Okay, so yeah, I mean, even more so the player side for sure. I mean, it's a bunch of seconds and a late first for Rashee Rice, Goddard, and Derrick Henry, which probably, I don't remember who had that, but I'm sure they made a deep playoff run with those players. So I mean, I think that's kind of how you buy some productive players and get some old ones in there. But also Rice had all those concerns about, oh, did we lose Jake?
We lost Jake.
Okay.
He just really just doesn't agree with us. He's like, I'm out. I can't take this anymore.
No, you guys suck.
I will say, looking at it now, like probably back then I would have been easily with the players, but I think the value now is a whole lot closer than it was back in August. Which is kind of what you're kind of buying into, right? If you're buying into an asset like Henry and Goddard, well, I guess Goddard probably went up in value, and Rice is just like, who knows what's going on with that guy. But I guess you kind of expect to lose some dynasty value when you're buying older running backs like that. But I think it's probably definitely closer now than it was back then. So
the other thing with this, I think Rice still had some of the concerns, right? With like,
yeah, he did.
That's the context.
And stuff like
that was the context here. So I don't think he had
Yeah.
received the suspension just yet. And so the concern here was that it could have been, a full year suspension, not knowing exactly like where it fell. And that definitely impacted the value situation here, where I think if that didn't happen, Rice at that time was probably easily to first.
And now, I guess, I mean, since we're speaking of the value now, I mean, Henry had a great year, right? And he's obviously old, but he's probably going to have, at least some value heading into the future, not nearly as much as he did this year for sure. Goddard, like your eyes said, picked up some value probably there. And then Rice, once again, has concerns. Well, he again has concerns because of the allegations of abuse of his ex-girlfriend, right? Yeah, which is, I mean, Jesus Christ, it's like every other fucking player, it feels like, has some of these issues. It's horrible. But yeah, so I mean, I don't know, where do you guys lean on kind of this trade at this point? Because I can understand being on the pick side, because Goddard, even though he picked up the value, probably isn't going to carry that very long. Henry, same thing. And you pray that Rice just beats these allegations, I guess, in terms of fantasy football, as terrible as that sounds.
Yeah, the terminology of beats these
oh my god
allegations was really poor choice. But yeah, by all means, that might be his method. I have no idea.
He's gonna beat him in a submission, just like everything else.
Yeah, it's a singular way of life.
I hate myself. I'm sorry.
I feel like specifically here, like getting into the value, especially in this league, I think that's also really important to understand, just like the generalized context. Like this was another one of the leagues where in DU1 and DU2, I do think that the teams were a little bit lopsided in terms of like who was able to compete and who wasn't. And I did feel like the team that acquired what we believe was the better value at the time could have easily gotten out at the appropriate time of probably all three of these assets and looked like a genius. Like you probably could have left this trade with now 3.5 first probably sitting on your roster if you would have gotten out of Rashee, within the first 2 to 3 games he was back. playing with Mahomes, getting off of Derrick Henry. And I'm saying this mainly because the playoff push from this team was really short-lived. And I think they could have easily understood that from just seeing where their roster compared to the rest of the league. And that's the type of thing that ends up screwing you a little bit, I think, more than anything else, because there was a way to basically take 1 first and 3 seconds and turn it into 3 firsts. And that
or
seems
even
like
two.
a great way to flip. Or even 2. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, even if you just sold Henry and Rice, right? Like, and got off of those guys for 2. I mean, of course, you know, probably have to make a package to get there, but yeah, it's definitely a fair point. That's an interesting one to look at now, given all the happenings. I think Jake's kind of nailing it, though, is that with a lot of these trades, when you make one like that, on the player side, you want to try to get a return on that investment as soon as possible, and you have to evaluate your team and be honest about where your team's at, and that's a big part of this.
Cool. Let's move on to Listener League numero dos. On June 6th, we had a trade for Kyler Murray, Brenton Strange, and Marvin Harris Jr. for Justin Herbert, DJ Moore, Dalton Kincaid, and what ended up being 26-201. At the time, we did not cover it, but this happened again in June, first week of June.
Man.
You know, at the time, I probably would have chosen the Kyler side.
Yeah, I think so too.
And I still think that I take the Kyler side, honestly, because Brenton Strange is proven to be, from June 6th, was basically free. And now he's actually got some value. So I think I still take the Kyler side here.
Yeah, and there is potential, truthfully, that Kyler does get a job, right? Like there is a potential that he is starting somewhere this next year. So I can understand that. I personally, the way I see it right now is I kind of think it's like Herbert over Marvin and Strange, and then the combination of those other players kind of can cover the Kyler side for me enough to kind of lean on that Herbert side. But I definitely get, you know, where you're at with that. You're right. It's very close still to this day. But that's the thing with like the quarterbacks like Kyler, where, I mean, you couldn't have had that much confidence in him heading into this year. You know, like there was plenty of concerns and signs. So I think we just need to kind of account for that sometimes more than just being like, oh, well, the guy can run and score me points, so let me make this trade. That said, it's not like DJ Moore, Kincaid, and the 201 are like super alluring assets. So again, I get why that other side is, is palatable. But Jake, what do you think?
Yeah, I think I agree with both of you. At the time, I could definitely
both. Just joking.
Yeah, sorry. Fuck one of you, and then I agree with the other one. But you can be the determining factor of who I agree with. No, first and foremost, when you said that Kyler Murray might have a job this year, I thought you meant with like Activision. But I didn't know. I didn't know exactly where. Like, I don't know where I would take this trade, because I do think that like when this trade occurred, you definitely still had liquidity with DJ Moore, a lot more than you did currently. Like I remember looking through the trades, and in another league, it wasn't DU2, but I believe DJ Moore went for the 108 in and around this time period. And like, if that's the case, or like very happily will convert that. And I don't think that was that far-fetched. Like, there weren't that many voices in and around the May-June timeframe of people being that fearful of Luther Burden taking up all of the target share. Same thing with Colston Loveland. And so we might have been talking about that. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying the market itself was allowing for that to happen. And the same thing with Dalton Kincaid. I don't think folks were like completely out on him all that much last offseason. If anything, I think there was a narrative about Dalton Kincaid being the guy, right? Like he was going to be the singular target earner on this team because they had no fucking wide receivers outside of Khalil Shakir. And so for me, I really do think that I would probably go with like best singular asset. And at the time of the trade, that would have been Herbert. And I knew that the liquidity is there. But this is one of those trades why I wanted to include it here, because it is so challenging to see what the best way to maneuver around this is. And I would like to kind of question both of you. Now that we're sitting here, what is this, like 8-9 months later? What is Marvin Harrison Jr.'s value to you? Like, what are you doing with that asset if you sat on it for this long?
Like, I'm probably sitting on it for longer, to be honest, and hoping that that the QB situation gets a little bit better this year, and he continues to develop. I think that you're gonna have, like, I think if you sell him now, I don't think the price is going to go too much lower into the season personally, and I do think that there's a chance that it picks up a little bit more. And so I'd probably continue to hold. I will say that the person who got Marv in this deal ended up moving him, I believe, for Amari and Hampton in some form or fashion. If I'm looking at that correct, this is DU2, right?
Yeah, Amari and Hampton and Imani
Vidal. Yeah, Amari and Hampton and Vidal. So that was their adjustment from that trade, which is probably a solid move. Not the worst, but I think it was Quentin Johnson and Marvin Harrison, a third and 2/3 for Hampton and Vidal. So I mean, a solid trade value wise in general there. Just worth mentioning how that worked out. But yeah, I'm probably holding Marvin Harrison Jr. And also just on the Kincaid comment that you made, I do think his value will probably pick up again. Because it's just almost like a yearly.
Yeah.
It's a yearly thing, and if they don't add a significant wide receiver or significant weapons in the passing game, he's gonna be kind of the guy again. And this year also, he was kind of marred by injuries, which I'm not the biggest Kincaid guy, but worth mentioning in terms of his value. I think people can make excuses and get back into him, so plenty of value on that side. The 201 is not a bad asset. It's an interesting trade. It really is. And if you are active enough and continue to move some of those pieces, then, you can make some return on those investments for sure.
All right. Next one, DU2, happened in May 22nd. Not exactly going in chronological order here, but that's okay. Little things like that bother me. But so we had Nico Collins and Kamara for Hockenson, Rice, and a 26th third. At the time, Billy said he would take the Nico side, but he's hesitant. Jake said he would take the Hawk and Rice off of the Kamara completely for build, very high on Hawk. And I took the tight end side, hoping that Rice would be 100% on arrival. And I had concerns about Kamara age. So Billy was absolutely wrong. You want to talk about it?
Was I? I don't know. I mean, I might have been right. Hawk had a really poor year. Rice now with all the, the stuff, and a late third. I don't know. I mean, I feel like Nico is probably the more stable asset at the very least. And I'm not a Nico stand by any.
Oh.
Sorry. Dog agrees.
All right. We are not Nico's name around the dog.
But yeah, I'm not a Nico stand by any stretch of the imagination.
What about you, Jake?
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting one. I think I was wrong. I think I was wrong 100% about what TJ Hockenson was going to provide this season from a fantasy perspective. And I think that had a lot to do with the fact that I underestimated how shit JJ McCarthy is. And that really rubbed me the wrong way in a lot of trades that I ended up partaking in this season. Not that I actually thought that highly of JJ McCarthy. I just thought that from a tight end perspective, TJ Hockenson was just going to be significantly more targeted and have a stronger impact in the offense. That being said, this really does almost boil down to Nico versus Rice, as Hawk, the late third, and Kamara are almost all borderline dead assets, with
Mhm.
Hawkinson probably having some more life than Kamara,
Yeah.
and the third
sure.
by all means. But I just mean like from like an actual structural roster build perspective and like what you're actually going to do with them. It's really just those two major assets. And to Billy's point, I would much rather be on Nico's side right now than Rashee Rice, just given all of the legal issues that Rashee Rice is going to potentially be handling. And the fact is, and this is something that's been talked about in the Discord, and, you know, I tend to push against it, but this idea that, you know, stupid man does stupid thing once, stupid man will probably do stupid thing again mentality has unfortunately proven right more times than not. And so this idea of trying to get off of athletes who unfortunately do get in trouble with the law more than once is more likely to occur continuously. And I think we should probably be a little bit more mentally conservative with those assets as we continue to move forward, instead of trying to acquire them at market value.
A la Jordan Addison. Different stuff, but similar in terms
same idea.
of consistency in the wrong direction. Real quick here, there's a bunch of YouTube comments I haven't hit on, so let's touch on those real quick. One related, intrusive thought: is KOC a fraud? And I fixed your spelling error there by accident. Is KOC a fraud? Looking at Lefty Joe here, looking at JJM. If JJM just stinks, is that KOC's fault? Like, because he couldn't develop him, you know, year one or whatever. I don't know, with what he had done with Darnold and revived his career. Like, are we putting that all on Darnold now? Like, I don't know about that. Like, I think KOC is a pretty damn good coach, and I just don't know if JJM is that guy right now, you know. And also, it takes time, you know, for some of these dudes to develop. And if there's anybody that you'd want developing them, I do think Kevin O'Connell is one of those guys. Anybody have any different thoughts there?
The only anecdote I'll share, I fucking hate Daniel Jones, but he has spoken incredibly highly of Kevin O'Connell and his impact of just playing with him for, I think it was like 10 or 11 weeks, and what that just structural understanding of what playing the quarterback position looks like. It's funny because we've seen different quarterbacks play under different coaches, i.e. Daniel Jones under Brian Daboll, to not get better. But we have seen Brian Daboll have impact on other quarterbacks and be successful. Same thing will happen with Kevin O'Connell, potentially with JJ McCarthy, or we'll see some growth in the following year. We don't know, but I do think that more often than not, this is probably more so down to like personality mismatch than anything else.
Real quick, I think this is the famous quote, maybe from KOC. I don't remember who exactly it was from, but organizations fail young QBs before young QBs fail organizations. But I honestly think that's deeper than the head coach or the main person who's developing them. I think what that is a lot of the times organizations, even from front office down, are like, we got to figure this out, and we got to get something, you know, right next year. We can't wait 4 years for this guy to you know, develop. And so I think that is more of where that comment kind of came from. But I do think there's some truth to that for sure, in terms of not giving these players enough time to develop. Patriots legend KOC, backup for Brady. Gotta love it. Real quick here, I think this is Jay in the Discord. I'm a believer in not acquiring headache players. That's not a terrible motto to have. I mean, let's be honest. It'll definitely save you some headaches as well. Let's see. There was some other stuff here I wanted. Okay, here we go. Big boy Uriah, you're back. QJ lovers rejoice. Gordo said, bad QJ or worse QJ?
Hey,
sorry, I had to throw it out there. I like those comments. But thank you for everybody being here live and in the comments. Love that stuff. We can keep it pushing.
Moving on. DU3, February 6th. Trading away picks in February. 25 first.
Sorry, that made me laugh. Your eyes disgusted. Trading away picks in February.
25 first, 25 second, and 27 third for A-Chain, Kendra Miller, which ended up being 25 103, 25 209, and an early third which those picks ended up being Trayvon Henderson, Jalen Milroe, and a third for essentially Achane and Kendra Miller.
I mean, I don't think it's a bad trade necessarily. Like Achane
works out.
already was well established as a really good player, right? I mean, if there was concerns about Tua and that stuff, like understandable, but obviously the person was not thinking this was going to be the 103. Like that's for sure. I don't think they were considering that. But
no,
even so,
these picks. Well, let's think about the timeline here. The picks were already defined. This was
Yeah,
I read
that wrong.
This was after the season last year.
I'm sorry.
Wrong. Yeah.
Okay, I thought that. I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah, you're good.
Fair enough. But either way,
Thanks,
either way, I think that that's a fair trade for Achane. Like it's
still
a
is
first,
a fair trade.
A second, and a third for Devon Achane. That's a very solid deal.
Yep. Anything?
Yeah, no. The only thing there is just like not knowing who you might be selecting at the 103 that far in advance, right? Has some level of risk, I think, associated to it, and not knowing exactly like what you're going to do. As Joe just stated, he was hoping to get Hampton at the 103. I think that drastically impacts kind of your own value assessment of what that pick looks like, right? Like having Hampton there and potentially having a tier break at Henderson could be a huge deal for you. Being forced to maybe go Cam Ward if you feel like the quarterback value makes more sense. That type of decision making does have its own risk versus having Achane there, when I think that you probably could, if that's how you're trying to get into the pick, you can just trade Achane on the day probably for the 102, right? Like there's probably a way to maybe get into that pick and get the player that you actually want to, rather than being hopeful about what that pick might turn into. That's the only thing I'd say, like in retrospect. But I don't think that the value is necessarily bad. The 103 in 2025, I think, was equivalent to probably 2 firsts, and then the person who had Achane ended up turning it into 2 firsts. So it's about the same value as the window continued to cycle through the entire season.
Yeah, in a vacuum, I do like the Achane side just generally, but your point is actually fantastic in terms of, trading for the picks there. Like this early on is definitely a huge risk. So yeah, if you have a player in mind you're hoping for, you definitely want to, if you're just like, I want the 103 and I want whatever's going to fall to me there, then, and you're fine with that, then go for it. But if you have a specific player, you got to wait till closer to the draft, at least, so you understand exactly what's going to fall. If not, wait till draft day, like Jake said.
Cool. Moving on. April 25th. This will probably be right after the draft, then likely. Drake May was traded for Sam Darnold and the 106. 106 turned out to be Teteroa McMillan, plus the 25 306, which came to be Jalen Noel. Once again, it was our boy Lefty Joe received Drake May in this.
Some foresight there. I dig it. Again, this is before May, went on the run this season, but even so, I mean, I wasn't super high on Darnold in a league that's not fixing QB scoring at all. 106 in Darnold, like that's kind of how you're looking at this. That just doesn't seem like enough for a guy with May's potential even back then. So yeah, I mean, I would have. I think I remember this trade, and I remember looking at it like, God damn it, why could I not have gotten May? But yeah, like that's a fantastic trade, and I guess just for the other side, like when you're making these deals, I just feel like we're overvaluing Darnold in that situation. No, like we know, first of all, that he has limited upside, just the kind of player he is, right? It's not like he's going to be running all over the field. He's not going to give you those rushing points. Even as good of a season as he's had, I think he had a pick in almost every game this year, right? Until the playoffs. He's been nails in the playoffs, don't get me wrong. But there's just a ton of risk associated with Darnold. And to give up such a young, promising QB for that side, I just think it's a little risky. It certainly could have worked out. We've seen it in the past workout. And T-Mac is not a bad asset, don't get me wrong, but I just don't think it's enough to cover the May side. But again, this is coming with some hindsight bias. So What are your thoughts on this, Shirai?
Yeah, you pretty much nailed it. I mean, I guess looking back, like you're like, hey man, like Darnold could have got me through this season. I could get off of Darnold at any point, but I missed out on T-Mac, which I think is actually a really good asset. Pretty good rookie season if you all things considered. So I think that maybe part of you's feeling bad that you're missing out on T-Mac, just having like a young wide receiver that could be on your team for the next 8 years. But I don't think that you feel bad whatsoever looking at May on your roster. So it's a good choice all around. Darnold is one of those things you're like, hey man, was he system quarterback in Minnesota? How's it going to look like here in Seattle? So I think it was really fair and probably just smart to move off of Darnold at the time for whatever you could get. So I bet he's still pretty happy about
it. He said so. Was happy about that one.
There you go.
Excellent. Jake, any extra thoughts on that?
Yeah, I can't believe you besmirched Sam Darnold's name like that. Sam Darnold had 7 interception-less games, just so you're aware. That's not what I think you said. 1 or something.
It's that East Coast, bias thing.
I think you said that he only had like 1 interception-less game this season. Or
no, I said he had like 1 interception per game
every
or something
game.
like that.
That's what I mean. Interception-less would be zero games. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, which is just rude. I think all to say, like we just talked about how Joe received the 103 before for H-Han. If I'm trying to get off May, like I understand trying to get into that more elite pick of the 103. I just don't see why you would get into the 106 and be happy with that, or why you're not going for the 103 and the 106 for a starting quarterback in the NFL who was a top 5 pick the year before, who had a relatively promising rookie year. It wasn't completely negative like a lot of like the general media provided. And I think like trying to get out of these guys so early, we saw the same thing with folks with Caleb Williams as well. It's just like you're more often not going to lose in those circumstances unless you really are looking at some finer details that the rest of us aren't. And so like for my big thing here, it's like if you are wanting to get out on May, that just make sure that there's a little bit better liquid return. And that wouldn't be a mid-first and Darnold. It would be, even if you are fine with Darnold being that like replacement points perspective, which still isn't a terrible play. Like I'm fine with that. You should be going for a little bit higher upside and more elite draft capital pick like the 103. And you knew that Joe had that. So I think that's my only qualm at the time. It ends up not looking as bad because I do think that Tedero McMillan is now probably sitting at like that 1.5 to almost 2 firsts value going into year 2. And Sam Darnold is probably hovering at like an early second pick still a year later. So it's not terrible, but you're talking about QB2 and Keep Trade Cut, who continues to hover back between QB1 and QB2. That hurts. Like that's a lot of additional value that you could have gotten out of that player if you were just a little bit more patient.
Okay, and let me set the record straight here. I was wrong about the number of games, but he had 14 interceptions this year, and it's the second most he's had in his career. Just want to say that.
Talking about this. Oh my god.
And
well, because he wants to defend himself. He had 1 game with 4 interceptions. Let's. That's a huge outlier. That's a huge outlier. He had 7 games without an interception. You made it sound like the poor dude was throwing picks to everybody.
And I'll also say that he was 25th in points per game. Just want to say that in terms of fantasy. So
yeah, I wasn't defending his fantasy output by any means. Yeah. I agree. He wasn't particularly great from a points per game perspective.
All right, moving on. GU4.
It's like we're still talking about this shit. Jesus Christ.
April 23rd, 1992. It's close.
It was close.
We had Sam Howell, AJ Varner, 25-301. For Romeo Dobbs, Damian Pierce, 26.
Alec Pierce.
Better.
Much better Pierce.
26-305 and 25-208, which ended up being Mason Taylor.
I did not catch that part of that trade. Holy cow. 208 Mason Taylor is crazy, by the way.
Sam Howell, huh?
I'm just trying to figure out what, like, back in April, was there some Sam Howell buzz going around that I don't recall? Like, or is it that we
Uh,
thought Barner was going to be all of a sudden the starting tight? Not we, whoever made this trade thought Barner was going to be like the starting tight end. Like, I almost feel like you could cut off the 208 and the 305, and then maybe you're like, okay, but still, I'd want the Dubs and Pierce side probably,
yeah.
or the Dobbs and Pierce side.
Dang. Yeah. I wonder what's going on there with the Howell and Barner thing. I mean, it's been. I'd have to go back and listen or something, but that just kind of right now it just seems absolutely nuts, right? That you would ever make this trade. Even then, it's probably one of those trades where I was like, why would you do this? But yeah, it's definitely the Dubs and Pierce side by far.
So I believe at the timing of this,
Jake's got time.
Sam Howell had just signed for, yeah, I don't think that was it. Sam Howell had just signed for the Minnesota Vikings. And I think there were rumors that Sam Howell was somehow going to be competing for the starting job in Minnesota. And I think this is like one of those things where we allow hopium in that window to just kind of get the best of us. And we're like, oh, I'm going to be able to acquire a starting quarterback ahead of the window. But like, it's cool to do that, but not at this cost. Like, why are we sending close to, at the time, probably 2 seconds and 2/3, or maybe 1 second and 3/3 for the upside of what Sam Howell could potentially be in Minnesota, which he didn't even stay there for, which is crazy. He ends up getting traded to Philly. And then on top of that, you end up getting into AJ Barner as the most elite asset of the group, who unfortunately has...
You can't even use elite in that context.
You know what I was saying that sarcastically. I just, this isn't me poo-pooing AJ Barner. He's completely fine, but he's just not a startable asset in a lineup league. Like, I just don't know what we're trying to get into here. So all that to say, I think that's the context, but realistically, it's just like, this is when we try and get like too Galaxy Brain, and we end up losing so much value. It's okay to get Galaxy Brain and like send a couple of forts for a player that you're a little hopeful on, but this is just not the package that you should be doing it for.
Yeah, I mean, Jake took the words right out of my brain. I was thinking the whole time, hopium. That's what it is. Like, you cannot fall into that. If I just get Sam Howell on my team, it's like, we've seen this too many times before with Sam Howell. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think like Jake said, it's the cost. You didn't need to do that. You simply didn't need to do it. There was no market reasoning for this. You know what I mean? It was more just like, I'm going to overwhelm this person and get these assets that I want. And so you kind of got to, push those feelings down sometimes and not make these kind of mistakes.
Sam Howell was QB 12 in 2023, okay? But he also had 21 interceptions thrown. All right,
that's not far off from 14. That's not far off from 14.
Oh my God. No, it was the 7 fucking games that Sam Darnold didn't throw an interception. You're right.
I couldn't help myself.
Christ. Uriah, save me, please.
I'm trying. All right. Moving on to later on in the year, DU4, July 12th. A reasonable trade was made. Chuba Hubbard for the 27 second, third, and fourth.
This is a super interesting one right now.
I mean, I think it's fine. Like, Rico Dowdle is free agent. Yeah.
This year.
Yes.
So, and Chuba's still there, not a free agent.
Correct.
So I think getting into Hubbard at that time was probably decent price. It might have seemed like a lot at the time. I know people are high in the 27 class, but I tend to not care about that as much, especially in July. That's something that kind of shakes out okay for you.
Yeah, I think the reason I included this one was, one, there weren't a lot of trades. Clearly, I included the one we just talked about in D4 that were not the three of us partaking in the trades.
That's crazy.
I know. I honestly, it was pretty insane. Like, just going through all of them and just seeing Billy, myself, and you in every single trade was just like, all right, well, I'm going to have to find something. But yeah, I actually think that this was a really, really affordable price for Chuba Hubbard at the time. If anything, it was probably too cheap. But the fact is that now that we are here almost 8 months later, it doesn't look that bad. Like, it really does look like you're getting into a relatively stronger draft class. You have potentially more liquid in those draft picks than you will potentially in Chuba. But to your point, Uriah, there's a very good window where Chuba actually comes back to value. I think the concerns that people had at multiple points of last season are completely gone if they don't bring in another free agent running back, and he's up against Jonathan No ACL Brooks, and it's just the two of them competing for carries with what's the other Etienne brother, Trevor Etienne.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, if that's the backfield, looks pretty good for Chuba, right? So there's a very good chance that Chuba once again increases in value over this. It's one of those where I think we're going to see like a lot of different waves of what this value looks like, but I think at the time I would have very much said you undersold on Chuba. I think right now I could say to myself, that's not terrible return. But I think in 6 months, I could also say again, you undersold on Chuba.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, definitely fair. I will say, I wonder if now is kind of a good time to seek out a trade moving off of Chuba, because the last time we saw him, he scored 2 touchdowns against the Rams in a playoff game. So people might have a favorable view of Chuba, and you might be able to get out for something similar if you want. So I think Chuba will probably pick up some value, to Jake's point, coming into this year, because like he just stated, there's not going to be as much competition most likely, and he is a decent player. So yeah, it's one of those really interesting ones where it's like it looked good back then, but it kind of feels similar now, but for different reasons, and like everything that happened throughout the year almost didn't impact like this value the way it could have, I guess, if it didn't if it didn't end the way it did, I guess.
All right, let's move on to DU5. May 7th. Sam Laporta for Garrett Wilson, Rondé Gadsden, and Helm.
Gunner.
Yeah, thanks.
It is worth mentioning that this is 1.75 tight end premium.
Correct. Yeah. So in May, I still would have went with Laporta, because I mean Gadsden had almost zero hype at May. Helm was pretty much unknown. Nobody cared whatsoever, and so it was just like the hope of Garrett Wilson. I probably would have went with Laporta, and I still think to this day I kind of still like Laporta a little bit here. Garrett Wilson's just had such bad luck, despite being a very good wide receiver. It just hasn't really worked out for him. And then Gadsden, I don't know, kind of a flash in a pan there. Like I feel like the smartest thing with Gadsden would have been able to sell him during those first few weeks where he was getting the hype, but I still think Laporta's kind of. Yeah. What about you guys?
I mean, Laporta's had a pretty bad streak of luck himself.
Yes.
I mean, after year one, kind of, production took a downturn with, I think, the scheme, having JMO and the receivers just get a little bit more involved. And of course, the running backs out of the backfield, or running back, I should say, Jahmyr Gibbs, more than anything, catching those passes. And then he gets injured this year, right? Like, so it's, and that's not necessarily factored into the trade when it happened, of course. Yeah, now I do kind of lean the Garrett Wilson, Gadsden, Helm side. I think you could just do a little bit more with that at this point. But I mean, I like Laporta. I just don't know if we're gonna get what we want out of him given the scheme in Detroit. He did have some good games. Don't get me wrong. He's a very good player. He had a couple good games for sure. So I could see him returning. Maybe this is hopium on my side. Jake, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that there's a world where everyone is happy from this trade in the next 12 months. Honestly, this does feel like relatively good value. The funny thing about this trade, and I know we didn't do this for a lot of the other trades, but this one was really interesting because the person who acquired Laporta ended up trading Laporta a month later, which felt like a very, at the time, probably not that expensive of a cost, because it was really just Garrett Wilson, to Uriah's point, because the Rondé Gadsden commentary was present, but it wasn't at the levels that it was by the end of May or even in June. So that person traded off of Laporta after basically at the time just really sending Garrett Wilson and got into TJ Hawkinson, Emeka Ibuka, and a fourth, which, there was a window there where you could probably say that was pretty fair value, but also you could say to yourself, you know what, I think that the value leans on the Egbuka side, right? Even in 1.75 tight end premium. The funny thing about all of that, though, is that before the league started, that owner ends up trading away Egbuka in a trade with Justin Herbert, Travion Henderson for Jordan Love and Amon-Ra St. Brown. So all of to say, Sam Laporta ended up being this like really interesting catalyst within this environment because the tight end value, I think, was so it was so interesting, especially in a DU league, because this was the first time that we boosted the tight end premium up to 0.75, where it typically would sit at 0.5. And I think that really electrified the market in a very positive way. And I just wanted to shout that out because as much as I think that this value on this trade probably leans the Laporta side at the time, the likeliness or the unlikeliness of Gadsden actually hitting, he ends up hitting, and Gunnar Helm's role actually ends up increasing throughout the season to where there's a very good chance that Okonkwo is not actually on Tennessee next year. And now you're in a position where it's Garrett Wilson and potentially two starting tight ends that have much bigger roles or maybe equivalent roles to Laporta or something similar. It doesn't sound so awful, but the hilarious nature is that Laporta ends up moving onto multiple different rosters and moving a lot of different other pieces that he ended up being one of the biggest catalysts in the market during the offseason, which is pretty interesting because Sam Laporta was probably tight ends, give or take 3 or 4 at the time, and wasn't one of like the key pieces in the tight end market, which you would think at, a Brock Bowers or like a Trey McBride level.
It's actually a really good point. And it's funny because I wonder if this was the manager's kind of agenda, if this was their goal, was like, let me get Laporta because of the premium and use him as a vehicle to get other stuff done, right? Which was actually a pretty smart move. It does seem like that was it ended up being the strategy, which makes that trade even more interesting in terms of the value back then, because it wasn't so much about, oh, I really want Laporta for these pieces. It was, I want Laporta because I'm in a 1.75 tight end premium league, and I think I can move him for subsequent other pieces, and ended up getting into an elite wide receiver, right? Which is really, I mean, we talk about this all the time. You can get into those elite pieces, those infinity stones, as Hogue calls them over on Superflex Super Show. I mean, that's how you're going to make your hay. That's how you're going to win leagues. And so I really like that, looking at it back then. And I do think that Jake's right. I think everybody can be happy at the end of the day on this deal, because the other side did end up producing a couple potential starting tight ends, and you can actually move them for value at this point. So very, very interesting trade, and really good evaluation there, Jake.
All right. On the same day, May 7th, we had another trade in DU5. We had Christian McCaffrey, Isaiah Pacheco, and 26 fourth for Jamo Okonkwo, Tyquan Thornton, and a 26 third. Go ahead, Billy.
I mean, when I look at this, I mean, I think it's just kind of the lessons learned from the last, year or two for me in terms of those elite. I mean, we've spoken about this quite a few times. Those elite assets, even though, they're getting older, you think that they're going to fall off.
Yeah.
This is not really how I want to move off of one of those pieces, despite wanting to get out a year early rather than, a year late. Like, I totally understand that. But I mean, looking at this, there's almost no assets I want here or would have wanted at the time. This pod was not a Thornton guy, really. Okonkwo is a fine, NFL player. Nobody hates Okonkwo or anything like that, but nobody's, trying to start them in their lineup. A 26th third, and then Jameson Williams. I mean, we've never been Jameson Williams guys over here. I certainly haven't ever been. And so if I'm moving off of CMC, like I gotta leave here with something, and like, I don't think I'm leaving here with nothing. And so like, we gotta have some more liquidity in this trade on that other side. And so I do understand wanting to get out a year early, but with these elite players, when they could bite you in the ass like this, and also go on runs like CMC had this year and be super valuable from a fantasy perspective, and you can get out of them for at least probably just a singular first would have been better than that other side, right? Like a singular first would have been at least better than that trade, and you probably could have done that throughout the year. So yeah, it's just a little bit of the galaxy braining, I think, in terms of like, oh, let me get like these 4 potential pieces that might do something, but it's like that might was like capitalized, and like it was gonna be really hard for that, I think, to work out properly. What do you guys think there?
I think you nailed it. Yeah.
I'm just gonna say, in defense of that owner, they did win D5 in its startup year. So even though they lost, I'm just saying, even though they lost probably like a good 7 to 8 points per game at the running back position, actually way more. What am I talking about? Or we'll call it the flex position over JMO. Like that's realistically the only asset here that is starting in that team, and they were still able to win. So that just means that the rest of their roster was hopefully that good. But yeah, I think shout out to them.
The rest of the league should be ashamed.
I know what the roster looks like. I'm
It
trying to
was
be
sixth
positive.
place. It was a 6th seed.
It was a 6th place team that should have probably been like in 9th place. It might have been the most crazy dynasty win I've ever seen in my entire life. But shout out to them. They I don't know if they deserve it, but they did it.
But whatever.
You definitely had the better roster for sure.
What's amazing
I think you lost
both,
1 game all season.
You both scored the least amount of points in the entire playoffs. In the finals. Nobody scored lower than those 2 teams in the entire playoffs. I was just like, whoa. Like, I mean, but honestly, that is the luck of that's like the luck in the bad luck of fantasy kind of thing, And so there is always that. And I mean, shout out to the manager that won. That was very impressive that they were able to pull it off after, losing quite a bit of value on a trade like that. So all I would say is for the team that won, you have
to bring that up again.
You have an opportunity to rest on those laurels and look for a way to improve that roster to get it back there now. So enjoy that win, buddy.
Yeah. All right. Let's move along here. Listeners exercise too. So some other league, somebody gave Dart and Metcalf received Burrow on October 15th. This is Tommy B.
Nice. Taking advantage of the Dart value there. Yeah. And getting Dart at 111. I mean, I think Jake definitely talked about this quite a bit and trying to turn a player like Dart into one of those elite quarterbacks. And this is exactly how you do it. Dart plus Metcalf for Burrow is money. Money, money, money.
Yeah, I think I did the same, like Dart plus a second or something like that in console wars and got into Burrow. Glad to see that Tommy and I are synergistic. Is that the word that people use in corporate speak? But yeah, yeah, we're synergy through scissoring. Is that that's what you were visualizing, right? Did I read that properly? Did I? No, is that okay? Great. The other thing I did want to include is that Tommy did break down what was even better is that this trade ended up also incentivizing him to then go into the market some more, because taking away DK Metcalf, as I'm sure everyone is fully aware if they've listened to Tommy on the Superflex Super Show, he typically will only have 2 major point scoring wide receivers, and then the third wide receiver will typically just be churn and burn to get into that wide receiver 3 spot. So in this situation, he was basically down a wide receiver, so he ended up hunting out Drake London and Nico Collins after, because it had created a hole at wide receiver. The compounding trades ended up manifesting, or compounding trades manifest arms race builds when you pick up falling first round quarterbacks in your rookie draft in April. He did also provide, which I thought was a really funny anecdote to the same thing we were almost saying before. Sometimes bad trades end up helping the wrong teams, right? And even though Tommy ends up, I think, winning this trade and it ends up probably bettering his team in the long run, he ends up getting booted out of the playoffs by the team that acquired Dart. So it doesn't always end so beautifully because we don't have a lot of control in this game.
The
but
irony.
it always works like that, right? But I do think that that's a really great kind of way to circle around what the work was done here by Tommy, because this is exactly what you do. You draft Art in the early second or late first. You add him onto another point scoring asset. I think DK at that point in time was actually doing really well with Aaron Rodgers.
Mm-hmm.
And you got into Joe Burrow, who basically was, a lot of people thought was done for the season. So in this situation, Tommy was probably able to start Joe Burrow potentially in the playoffs, which is pretty exciting stuff.
Cool. Another one from listener, Me Burrow. NFL preseason. This is actually kind of cool. Always wondered how like the stuff you see in preseason actually ends up helping you or hurting you. I feel like more often like making decisions based on like preseason stuff like really actually kind of hurts you, but not in this case. So this is cool. He said, immediately after I saw Caleb Johnson drop a wide ass open screen pass in the first preseason game, I shipped him. He gave away Caleb Johnson, RB2, Cam Skadaboo, Will Shipley in a third, and he received Pickens and Etienne, which is actually pretty crazy because he got Pickens cheap, really cheap at the time. His value was gone nothing but up since then. And then also Etienne, which I think a lot of people were kind of souring on, but had worked out for him pretty well there. So that's awesome. Doesn't always work that way, but that's awesome. That worked out great for him.
Yeah, I think that's exactly. Oh, go ahead.
No. I was just Pickens had already been moved to Dallas by this point.
Correct. Yeah, the narrative was that he was wide receiver 2 on Dallas.
Got it. Yeah. I mean, it's a fantastic. I mean, it's absolutely electric move. It would have. I mean, even if Caleb was moderately decent, it probably would have still been a great trade, to be honest with you. But I think to Uriah's point, if you always reacted to the preseason stuff, like you probably would have traded Jamar Chase early on too, right? Like when he was dropping the ball and he was saying the ball's smaller or bigger than in college and shit like that. So you do have to be careful. And Caleb is not Jamar Chase. Don't get me wrong in terms of even prospect. But yeah, definitely got to be careful in that respect. But there was plenty of concern before the drop pass with Caleb coming out. So yeah, it's a great move there and getting ahead of it. You're right. Running back 2 forever. He lives in my heart.
Honestly, Uriah calling him RB2 lives in my head all the time. Whenever I see Caleb Johnson's name, I literally tell myself RB2.
It's got to be the best inside joke DU has.
it had like honestly like I always listen back to what we do. I go back into our old film reviews. I do all of that, and we all miss on certain players. Some of them just like creep through, but it is so interesting because like when you do listen back to it, you're just like how do we end up bettering ourselves for the next time? And so I know like we talked about it last year, and at different points there will be different ways for us to continue to both motivate each other, but also better our processes to hopefully prevent guys like a Caleb Johnson from creeping up to the top.
And there's no doubt whether Uriah wants to play into it or not, like he's going to be more critical during this process because of that in terms of his running back evaluations. And I think us as well are going to make sure that we hold each other accountable in that regard. So I totally agree with Jake there. Real quick, I love this comment from Jay in the YouTube comments. If Chiggenhelm were one dude, it would have been a good tight end.
Yeah, that's true.
That's pretty funny.
Comment.
Yeah,
it's a great comment. Oh man. Okay.
Before we get out of here, let's hop into some recent trades and non-trades. That time of year, we do have just 2 of them, but that's cool. In a league, guessing this is one of Jake's leagues that he runs, Medical. We had Brock Purdy, the 113 for Hurts and a mid 27 second. And the 113 is basically at this point, like that's a free pick. Whoever probably won the toilet bowl ended up with that extra pick, correct? Yeah. All right.
Yep.
So yeah, he moved his Winnings from winning the toilet bowl, and Brock Purdy for Jalen Hurts and a 27-second.
Give me Hurts personally.
Yeah, I mean, I like Purdy's efficiency and all that, but he just doesn't really have the. His best outcome is not nearly close to it like an average like Jalen Hurts output is. So, and the 113 is, Hurts side.
Yeah, I mean,
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Jake. No.
I was just gonna say you'll be lucky to be starting the 113 in your roster this year, and so it just feels like a really tough value gap to be adding that on top of Purdy to make up for Hurts, and then to add a second on top of that just feels really crazy because once again, I'm putting this down as a mid-second. Who knows? This could be a top 3 second, and then you basically sent the 201, which is the 113, for the 204, and then you're really talking about in a better draft class, and now you're talking about Jalen Hurts for Brock Purdy. That sounds crazy, right? So it's just like trying to understand where the value is here and trying to make a little bit more sense of like where you're valuing players, because this is like really, really lopsided to me. I like both players by all means, and I don't see anything wrong with that. It's just really bettering kind of the market itself and not trying to be on the wrong side of trades like this, even if you want to get off of someone like Jalen Hurts because of the narrative, or maybe you think their performance is down, whatever it might be. I'm fine trading out of them. I just don't trade out of them like this is, I guess, my point.
I mean, I would say buy Jalen. Go ahead. Sorry.
Not necessarily the trade, but just about the pick value.
Mm-hmm.
I still think there's a ton of dynasty players out there that aren't. Well, I know for a fact there's a ton of dynasty players out there that don't actually do any prospect evaluation themselves, aren't really familiar with the draft class, and still probably will be looking at like the 110 as they need 110 in years past, and probably have not been caught up to speed on what's kind of taking place with this class. So I do think that there's still like some mistakes being made there, and maybe some advantages you could take from that, if that makes sense. Like, I don't think that everyone is well aware that what you're going to get with the 13th pick this year is not quite what we would have been expecting the previous years.
That's a great point. Okay, I'll just add one last thing because I think that that's like an amazing point to add additional context here. This is that league where we're talking about folks who have really small portfolios. This was their first ever dynasty league. A lot of them haven't picked up a second dynasty team. And what was their first rookie draft? It was the 2024 rookie draft, right? Where the first round was just absolutely stacked with talent. You were able to get guys like Ladd McConkey in the early second. And I think, to your point, it has unfortunately completely warped expectations if they're not putting in the additional work to understand what they're going to acquire. And that's not to say that there might not be value at the 113 or the 201. I'm not saying that. It's just understanding how absurdly top heavy the 2024 draft was, and then to think that that's what the rest of the drafts will look like, I do think is unfortunately like just a natural progression for people to think through psychologically, which doesn't mean that it actually will happen. It's just, I think, to your point, Uriah, that is probably how a lot of people do perceive it.
Yeah, cool. Great point. Real quick, I do think that in general, like Hurts is going to be a buy this offseason. I think there's some negative perception, stigma attached to him. So just generally that, but also
nobody wants to coach there.
Please. Yeah, exactly. The 113 also perception. People see the one and it's a first. So anybody who has these extra picks, look to do something like this if you can, because people will value it more than the 201, but it's still the 201, So that's a really big thing that also I think newer dynasty players don't really key on. There is a perception in your brain when you see that 113, initially you're like, ooh, but you got to take a step back and go, wait, that's not really a first round pick. And also to Uriah's point, then you add in the draft class piece of it, and it makes it even more stark of a difference. So you got to keep that at the forefront of your mind when you're making these trades. And if you have those picks, definitely seek out trades like this, or, try to use it in combination with something to tier up. I think a lot of the time you'll get somebody to buy in. Whereas if the 201 was actually in that trade, they'd be like, no. And it's like, there ain't any difference. So definitely worth utilizing in that way.
All right. Last one here, DU3. We had a 26, 103 plus, the 103 plus Egbuka for Neighbors, and the 26, 311.
Great band.
It is actually a fantastic band. I love them. Oh man. Like,
I'm worried about Neighbors a little bit. I mean,
okay.
Golly, it's hard, man, because if Neighbors can come back, which science is really good. Just seeing him on a crutch when he was there, and just kind of the way he's talking about it, like I think he's young enough and all that. Like you could really wait till the mid of the season for him to be back to like 100% Neighbors, and then like you're really, really happy with that. But I could understand being a little weary because obviously I have those feelings. I really like Ibuka, and kind of what's in front of him and what his future could look like. Even though I know he kind of fizzled off in the middle of the season, I could see taking the 103 and Ibuka side here and not feeling too terrible about it. I still think you would need more for Neighbors at this point. I kind of went in circles there. I landing on Neighbors side, but like cautiously on the Neighbors side.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly think that's a pretty good evaluation of the trade generally. Like, I do think that there's a lot, like, Ibuka in the 103 is good value. Like, it's good value. There's a good player, and it's a good pick, right? It's not the best class, but there's still going to be decent players there. But I do lean on the Neighbor side. I think I said this to Jake. I think he sent it to me in a text a couple days ago, and I was like, I lean the elite player here, and that's just kind of where I'm gonna stick with it. I'm not going to be too concerned about the injury. I'm actually, please take your time and don't come back until you feel healthy and make sure that, we're good to go. But yeah, I'm going to lean with Neighbors here, with the young QB and hope it works out. But the other side is good value. So I can't deny that. I think it's actually a really good trade.
Yeah, this was a weird one because the person who sold the person who sold Neighbors reached out to me as a Giants fan, was like, what are your thoughts on Neighbors? And I was like, genuinely, to Uriah's point, I do think that there is a lot of concern with just the generalized health and recovery process from a natural perspective of like what's happened so far. The reporting on it is not particularly great, and I understand being skeptical. That all being said, the dude is 22 years old. He is going into year 3. He will be 23 at the start of the NFL season, but he is younger than Emeka Egbuka, which is crazy to say out loud. Even though Emeka Egbuka was a rookie last year, right? And I do think that like from an NFL career perspective, yeah, right? Like, isn't that nuts? And from like an NFL career perspective, like as long as the healing process and the doctors properly assess this, there shouldn't really be a major concern. And like for us to treat this first ACL injury, which by all means he did tear more than just an ACL, totally aware of that. But for us to like consider this now like a second or third injury where it might have like this like trickling down effect, we just don't have any available research to show that necessarily will be the case, because we've seen too many other instances of folks completely being fine and not having another ACL tear or an MCL tear or an LCL tear in their careers, right? So I'm of the mind where, to Billy's point, I'd much rather be in the elite asset pool. The fact that from what I've seen and what I've watched, I don't even have 2 elite assets in this upcoming draft. The fact that you might even be able to get one at the 103 just really makes it challenging for me. And I don't think Emeka Egbuka is that. I like Emeka Egbuka. I think the market will probably be at certain points of time above what I believe his value should be, because we do like fantasy points. I just don't think he's elite. That's just not necessarily what I believe in that skill set. But that being said, I think this is a great way to get into 2-point scoring assets that you can start in your team if you're trying to level out the scoring. And that's not necessarily something that I'm trying to ever do on most of my rosters. And so I'd still stick with the Neighbor side.
Yeah, 103 is almost guaranteed to be one of the wide receivers, right? Because we're assuming Mendoza's probably gone and Jeremiah Love's probably gone. I mean, Mendoza certainly could fall to 103, and that would maybe be the best case scenario for this
Yeah.
trade in terms of value.
I would think
But other than
Jeremiah
that,
and Lemon, but
Yeah,
right,
it's either Lemon or Tate. Yeah, exactly. I think that
and
is
neither
very
of those
much
are even near the level of Malik Neighbors, right? As a prospect,
correct.
No.
right?
Correct. Yeah, as a prospect, that is 100% correct. And I think that's the issue. Is like, do you find that the gap between that player, even let's say at highest end, you get the starting quarterback in that situation in Superflex, and you do something similar to what Tommy did with Jackson Dart, you have a lot of work that you have to do now to get into that elite quarterback, right? Which I think would have just been easier to just do with Neighbors, personally.
Right. Trade Neighbors and something for the elite quarterback if you want to just go that route, right? Like why even take the long way to grandma's house?
The idea here, I guess, is that you're breaking down Neighbors, right, into this is an assumption. You're breaking down Neighbors into that other asset that you can then get into potentially quarterback, get that quarterback paired up, but you also still have the other thing in your other hand, which is Emeka Ibuka.
Yeah.
Which is more valuable than the second or whatever you'd have to add on to Mendoza when Justin Herbert goes down next year, whoever that other quarterback is. Not even that Justin Herbert is of Joe Burrow quality, but you get the point.
Hey, now that he has McDaniel at the OC, maybe he is.
For 12 months. Okay.
I kid.
All right. Before we get out of here, I just wanted to go back to something I pulled up with the whole Kyler Murray thing. If anybody cares, I just thought it'd be interesting because I know that they gave him hell of a deal. I'm just wondering how big of a hell of a deal was that. So, according to Over the Cap, they
Activision or sorry,
if they cut him pre-June 1st, that's almost 55 million in dead money, with only 2 million saved. If they cut him post-June, that's 47.5 million dead money with only 5 million saved. So they're going to have to look for a trade partner. Otherwise, he'll be back in Arizona for another year.
I think there were rumors, right? They were saying that they would give him up for a second, but the whole idea would be to take over that contract. I just don't know if anyone's willing to do that, right?
That's what I'm saying. So
yeah.
But to Uriah's point, though, he's likely starting somewhere, or at least get. You know what I mean? Like if somebody's trading for him, they're starting him.
Yeah.
If he doesn't get traded, how are they going to let 50 mil sit on the
garage?
Yeah, fair.
So it's like, I do think that there's some lingering value with him for sure. It's a good point, Uriah. I'm glad you brought
that money matters to somebody making the decisions, right? Coaches be damned.
45 mil. It's crazy.
47 on the cheap end. If it's pre-June 1st, then we're talking about almost 55.
And look, we've seen contracts get eaten before. Don't get me wrong, like if they're that bad, but
that's a whole hoagie. That's a lot.
I don't think he's been that bad to be like, yeah, let's just forfeit 45 mil or 50 mil or whatever it is. So you bring up a good point with the contract for sure.
All right. Anything else you guys want to talk about before we get out of here?
No.
I just want to mention that we're gonna start the prospect profiles next week, which is super exciting. So we'll be getting into a couple players each week. We'll probably pick it up as the off season goes on, and hit on 4 a week and whatever it is, whatever we can stand and put together. But very excited to get into that. So stay tuned.
Cool. With that, anybody listening on YouTube and all that, there should be a link to join our Discord. It's awesome, even in the off season, quote unquote. It's been pretty active, and everybody in there's amazing. So that's kind of nice.
Ain't no off season in the DU Discord, bro. That thing is popping. And I'm sorry I haven't been as active in there. I've just been ill to the point where I can't even look at a phone. So I will get back in there soon, and I appreciate everybody for being so active and picking up the slack.
Other than that, y'all have a good night.
Peace out. Catch you next time.